the time, what I had was not a common disease. Anyway, he wrote something down, and I went back the next day. He said, were you in a coma on the plane? I said, no, I wasn't. He said, because you should have been in a coma. I said, why do you say so? He said, because your blood sugar was at the highest level it can ever be. And he said, also from one of the tests, one of the muscle tests, he said your muscle test was at 11,020, and the maximum was 110, which means that your muscles are weak. So my muscles had been destroyed. And explained to me that what I had was an autoimmune disease. So I said, what exactly is that? He said, it's a disease that has no cause and no cure. And in my own case, the long spectrum, he said, in my own case, what happens is that the body soldiers, instead of body soldiers to protect the body from viruses and bacteria, my body soldiers were recognizing my good organs as viruses and bacteria. And so they were killing. So my body soldiers were killing my muscles, thinking that they were, so my muscles were very weak. And I also had diabetes. And so he told me that the medication for diabetes, which is a steroid, the medication for the polymyositis, what I had was polymyositis, which is an autoimmune disease for muscles. A medication, which is steroids, is going to make diabetes worse. So it was catch-22 situation. And I was put in hospital for about a week in England. And the only thing, I don't have a sweet tooth. The only thing that I cannot do without eating, and they told me I had to stop, was dodo. So I prayed to God. I said, Father, for the sake of dodo, please take away this diabetes. And I asked the guy who was treating me for diabetes, I said, have you ever had any patient being cured of diabetes? He said, no, never. And I told him, I said, you're looking at one. And he looked at me as if I was an illiterate from Africa. That this guy, she said, it can be maintained, you can maintain it for life. I said, no, I have a God in heaven who's going to cure it. Anyway, so I was in the hospital for about a week. And I had the picture of my daughter by my bedside. And every morning I used to cry out, not caring who was on the ward. And also to tell me that I don't have to check the time, that Mrs. Adepton, don't call Mrs. Adepton, that Mrs. Adepton wants to begin to pray in the morning, and it's 5 a.m. Anyway, that went on. And after a while, I was getting weak every day. My blood sugar was on medication, but my blood sugar kept dropping. So I came back to Nigeria after this was me when I came back to Nigeria, after 6 weeks of treatment in England. And I came back to Nigeria one day, and my doctor that was looking after the diabetes said, let's stop this insulin and let's see what happens to you, because I was on daily insulin, and let's see what happens to you. So I stopped the insulin. That was November 11, 1990. And I kept checking my blood sugar. It was normal. So the Almighty God helped me through that. I was cured of diabetes, and today, till to date, I do not have diabetes, to the glory of God, and I eat dodo as often as I wanted. This was me.
The purpose of the book was just to examine successful people and look beneath the surface, and it points out certain things, just through good storytelling that have helped successful, sort of people that have achieved what you might call extraordinary success, the help they got from other people, practice, and making the most of opportunity, and one of the conclusions you reach from reading this book is that there is no such thing as a self-made man. People succeed, particularly when you're talking about major success, it happens in context. And the book has two sections. The first part is called Opportunity, and we'll go through it in the chapters. And the second part is called Legacy. Now, the Opportunity part has 5 chapters. The Legacy part has 4 chapters. And basically, the 6 main things that contribute to extraordinary success or outliers, he points out, and I summarize them here. Opportunity is big, right? Opportunity is probably arguably the thing that captures it all. But the way to think about it is that he's making the strong case that it is almost better to be lucky or fortunate than just to be smart, and he tries to paint a picture throughout the book. And of course, timing. We say timing is everything. I learned that it was John Scully that first said this, the guy that used to be CEO of Apple back in the day. And then he talks a lot about upbringing, just the context in which we are raised. And the way to think about it is that nurture trumps nature. In other words, how people are nurtured and raised is almost more important. In fact, it's more important than the IQ. A lot is said about IQ and being very smart, but it turns out that there are quite a few smart people out there. It's really the opportunities people get in terms of how they are raised that matters. Then the 10,000 hour rule, which talks a lot about practice. Practice makes perfect. And the fact that you need 10,000 hours to gain mastery in any field, to be world class. And then he emphasizes the importance of meaningful work. And meaningful work doesn't mean, work that is high profile. In fact, you see that some of the best examples in the book were just work that you would consider mundane, but they had meaning. They influenced, the outcomes mattered to the people doing the work. And then he spent a lot, the second part of the book, talking about legacy, particularly around culture and values. And that values influence much more than we think. People actually are shaped by their values and their circumstances more than we think. Let's go to the introduction, and then we'll just go from there. In the introduction, he starts with a mystery. I mean, this guy is a great storyteller, as you will know from reading this book and other books. He starts off with something he called the Rossetto mystery, which is basically a mystery around these people that lived in this small part of, I think it was in Pennsylvania, called Rossetto, and they all sort of emigrated or came from Italy, in a small town in Italy called Rossetto. And it turned out these guys were living longer, didn't have heart disease, didn't have any of these problems that plague modern society. And of course, most people would have assumed that it's because of their diet, exercise, genetics, but a particular sort of gentleman went and researched it. Somebody called Wolf went and studied why these people, Stewart Wolf, went and studied why were they, a physician, why were they living longer? And what he found, which was almost like uncovering the mystery, was that, this was a community that nurtured its people, a close-knit, harmonious, nurturing community. And as a result of that, community and how harmonious it was and how nurturing it was, these people actually, had better quality lives and lived longer. And then
okay, so in summary, the whole book covers these 5 leadership levels, and then in each of the chapters he speaks about the upside, the downside, the best behaviors, and the beliefs that will take you into the next level. He highlights that leadership is not a position, but rather it's a process. Unfortunately, many leaders today think leadership is a position or a title. And he talks about the fact, so in summary, a very quick summary, the 5 levels are: 1, position, level 1 position, which is based on the rights of the leader, based on their title or the status. And people follow this kind of leaders because they have to. This is the lowest kind of leadership level. And this is where most, let's say about 85% of leaders, function from. Whatever position it is, that's the best they know. The second level of leadership is the permission level, which is based on relationship. And people follow you because they want to, because relationship has been built. So, it's not based on the rights, but it's based on the relationship. So they gravitate towards your leadership based on that. Then he says that people go along with those who they get along with, and he was quick to mention the fact that most people don't leave a job or an organization primarily because they don't like the job. They leave because they had people problems, and mostly because of problems with their boss. Okay, and then number 3 is the production level. Okay, and this has to do with results, and this is where people follow you for what you have done or doing, or what you are doing for the organization, the impact that you're making, the effect that they are seeing. And then level 4 is people development, and this has to do with reproduction, and people follow you because of what you have done for them. Okay, so it goes beyond being inspired by what you've done for the organization. They now begin to follow you because they're inspired by what you are doing for them. You are investing in them. And then the last level is the pinnacle level, which has to do with respect. And this is when the leader has gone to the point where people follow you because of who you are and what you represent. Now
the idea that many of us are afraid to face our fears. And so most times we have all these fears that haunt us, the fear of the unknown, and so many people are unsuccessful. So many leaders are not able to achieve their highest potential, whether for themselves, for their families, for their businesses, or whatever it is that they do. The reason they're not able to do that is because they allow fear stop them. I'm just going to read a couple quotes here where it says, "Many a false step was made by standing still." I totally loved that, because think about it, especially in 2020, we've all come into this year where we had this most amazing, we had these amazing goals, go mega, no nonsense goals. We want to accomplish all these incredible things. And then the pandemic happened. And then, most people were essentially stuck. And as we speak in November, there's still people who are at a standstill. When elections come in Nigeria, people are at a standstill. People don't make business decisions. Some people don't make investments, whether it's in real estate or in the stock market, because they're constantly at a standstill because of fear of the unknown. And so for me, reading this was really interesting, because it's something that if you read that particular chapter, how to do the fear setting exercise, where you ask the question, what is the worst that can happen? Right? If you ask the right questions, you can actually then embrace your fears, and you realize that at the end of that fear, usually it's not as bad. So I like the story that he shared. I'm just going to say, where he talks about the power of pessimism, defining the nightmare. I mean, this is a concept that I personally use in my life, okay? In business and in my personal life, which is okay. I remember, and that's why when I started by introducing, I talked about how I've been diagnosed, with cancer 14 years ago. And I had to ask the question, what is the worst that can happen? And the worst that can happen is that I die. And of course, I didn't want to die. But by asking that question, I was doing the exercise that he talks about in this chapter, which is facing your worst fears. If you're in business, the pandemic has hit, and then, you ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen? My business ends in 2020. Well, guess what? You're still living, you're still breathing. The same brain that you used to create that business, you can maybe use it to reinvent yourself and create something else. So that's what I love about this chapter, because it's so relevant, especially for leaders, for entrepreneurs, for, quite frankly, anyone. So when I ask the question, what's the worst that can happen? And I face that question and I realize, okay, well, guess what? If I die, I'll be with God. But guess what? I'm too young. I don't want to be with you yet, God. So what shall we do? And so that's where I then began to obviously get knowledge, get treatment, of course, apply faith prayers, and of course, all of the grace. And 14 years later, I'm still standing, I'm reviewing this book, and I'm truly grateful for that. But
thank you. Farming by revelation, for me, is like a 15-year journey in the spiritual aspect of agribusiness in this country, across West Africa and in South Africa. And there's a tagline here that says, farming by revelation, what they don't teach you in agribusiness school. So this book is in between the practice of agriculture and spirituality, which you hardly find materials on. The book has two parts. One is talking about God's agenda, the business of agriculture proper, vis-a-vis Nigeria, as it pertains to Nigeria, which is applicable to West Africa. And the part two talks about raising capital. My experience is that majority of the people that need funding for agriculture don't get the funding because even the banks don't understand the business of agriculture. They have a lot of robust, beautiful buildings, departments, but with just 2-3 people, in it. So many people find it stranded, even when they write a beautiful proposal, bankable, they lead them on, and for months, they don't get the funding. And that has happened to me. And the book basically tells a lot of stories a lot of real life stories. One of the stories is how I lost 17 million in one transaction in 2008 to 2009 when we produced sweet corn and some other corn. And for the people who know Xenon oil then, Xenon didn't have diesel. And so the corn, 250 acres of irrigated corn in February, when it was about just bringing the corn out, began to dry off. And I took loans. But what really happened there was that I took loans and there was no corn to sell because the corn did not come out. And I landed in 17 million debt. And I recall this story that happened after that. I couldn't come home because I had not fully negotiated with my creditors, and I put in my all. And one day, the LASMA and police officer, stopped me along CMS. And as they stopped, I was down, there was nothing. And they came into the car. One said, come, another said, wait. They came into the car, and I thought I was a strong man. And suddenly, I busted into tears because they wanted to extort, get money from me, and I didn't have money. I had gas in my car, gas cylinder that I couldn't fill up. And as I began to cry, the LASMA officer and the policeman, they began to beg me that, Oga, life will not end. We know you have problems. I've not said anything. and they begged me for about 20 minutes. I cried and cried and cried until they now said, Oga, calm down. They took me on a walk to just manage my emotions. And at the end of the day, they saw me back into the vehicle and allowed me go. Now,
the basic principle in this book is saying to you and I that the plan of God is for us to live life as natural as is possible, free of toxins. When you go to the hospital for whatever reason, you are most likely prescribed with some drugs. And many of us have so much faith in the medical system that as soon as the doctor tells you, you have this, you take it hook, line, and sinker, and start taking the drugs. But many of the times, the doctors have it at the back of their mind that some diseases are incurable. And the list is endless. They say hypertension cannot be cured. And God has made provisions such that we are able to reverse those things that we did get by our own ways. So it's a question of our own ways versus God's way. Now, when we talk about our own way, we'll be talking about things like toxins. So what kind of toxins are we looking at? We talk about things like white flour, things that we should eliminate from our diet, things that we should take away because they are not the planned foods for the body. So in this diet, you're supposed to eliminate cow milk and all dairy products. You're supposed to eliminate sugar, soft drinks, packaged fruit juices, ice cream, and all of that. I'm sure some people don't like my face again, but I did write the book. Reverend Mark Moss wrote it. Okay? Now you're supposed to eliminate white flour, shawarma, pizza, what else do we eat? Cake, and all of that. We're supposed to eliminate donuts and stuff like that. MSG. Now the men will not like this. All those things we cook with. I don't want to mention brand names, but you know them. All those cubes we cook with, most of them contain MSG, if not all of them. If you're going to get it.
First Black and 44th President of the United States of America. And it covers his early years growing up, his education, and the period leading up to his various elections. First to the Illinois State Senate, then the US Senate, the race for the Democratic Party nomination, and finally, the 2008 presidential election against the Republican contender, late Senator John McCain. Obama sets out to offer readers a sense of what it's like to be president of the United States, whilst also telling a more personal story that might inspire young people considering a life of public service. He planned to do it in 500 pages, which would definitely have made reading the book much easier than the eventual 700 plus pages of text and 32 pages of photographs. But it's well worth the investment of time. President Obama tells a fascinating story, weaving, as he promised, the job of being president into a very personal narrative around the lives of his wife, Michelle, his daughters, Malia and Sasha, his mother, his grandparents, his siblings, close friends, and his team, from his closest circle of advisors to the staff on the margins of his work, including the gardeners in the White House. Events of national and global significance are spun into this very intimate, human, yet deeply thoughtful and introspective story. He manages to tell it in a simple but elegant turn of phrase, with a generous sprinkling of quotable quotes.